Anne had lived at Green Gables for 2 weeks when Mrs. Rachel Lynde finally came to visit. Anne had spent her time exploring, making friends with trees and flowers. When Mrs. Rachel arrived, Marilla talked with her first. Mrs. Rachel asked, "Why did you keep Anne? You've never raised a child." Marilla said, "Matthew liked her, and I do too. She's smart but has faults." Then Marilla called Anne inside. Mrs. Rachel looked at her and said, "Well, they didn't pick you for your looks. You're so skinny, freckled, and red-haired." Anne turned red with anger. "I hate you. How dare you say that?" "Anne!" Marilla scolded. "Go to your room now." Anne ran upstairs crying. Mrs. Rachel huffed, "You need to punish that temper." After Mrs. Rachel left, Marilla told Anne, "You were rude. You must apologize." Anne crossed her arms. "I won't. I'm not sorry." "Then you'll stay in your room," Marilla said. Anne pouted. "Then I'll stay forever." The next morning, Marilla told Matthew about Anne's behavior. "Well, Rachel can be harsh," Matthew said. "Matthew Cuthbert," Marilla scolded. "Anne must be punished. All I'm saying is, be gentle. She's never had anyone to teach her." All day, Anne barely ate. That evening, Matthew sneaked upstairs. "Anne," he whispered, "don't you think it's time to apologize?" Anne thought, "I guess I could do it for you, Matthew." Later, Anne called down, "Marilla, I'm ready to apologize." Marilla was surprised but said, "All right, we'll go after milking." At Mrs. Rachel's house, Anne ran up and said, "Oh, Mrs. Linda, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me." Mrs. Rachel was startled but smiled. There, child. I forgive you." Anne grinned. "Do you think my red hair might change?" Mrs. Rachel chuckled. "Maybe it will darken." Anne clapped. "Oh, thank you." On the way home, Anne held Marilla's hand. "I love Green Gables." Marilla smiled. "If you're a good girl, you'll always be happy." Anne sighed happily and started daydreaming. Marilla, amused, was just glad Anne was quiet for a moment.